Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for everyone attending across all streaming platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Welcome to our Green New Deal Champions panel, where we'll be discussing good jobs for all and the Green New Deal on all levels of government. And it's amazingly, we're joined by AD64 Executive Board Member Fatima Iqbal-Zubair. We're also joined by Alhambra Mayor Sasha Renée Pérez. Hello, and we're also joined by Burbank Councilmember Konstantine Anthony. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is so amazing. So if you don't know, if you're not part of SLAY or you've never heard of SLAY before and you're watching, Sunrise LA Youth is a youth climate group in Los Angeles. Well, not just focused on climate, but focused on justice in every aspect. And we are working right now on a Good Jobs for All campaign. The Sunrise Movement, especially the national one, was played a huge role in making the Green New Deal national in 2018 and 2019, and we've just started the Good Jobs for All campaign. But before we get started, we wanted to acknowledge the history of the physical spaces across the country that we occupy, even though we're online. I'm currently on Tongva and Chumash land. Anyone who's not indigenous to the land they are on is on stolen land. If you know whose land you're on, drop the name in the chat. If you don't know, I would like to invite you to spend some time researching after this call. Our chat moderator is dropping some links in the chat right now. So the link has been dropped in the chat, native-land.ca, or you can text 907-312-5085. This might be a good place to start your research. We're here to fight for a Green New Deal. Our entire economy has been built on stolen land, the genocide of indigenous people, and using stolen labor from enslaved peoples. A just world cannot continue this way. We need a Green New Deal with indigenous sovereignty. Many of us are on the land of Tongva and Fernandeño Tataviam tribes. The Tongva people lived in as many as 100 villages across the LA Basin and Southern Channel Islands. With the Chumash and the Tongva were some of the most influential people in the area when Europeans arrived. They had an extensive trade network and vibrant culture based on a view of positioned humans, not as the apex of creation, but as the one strand in a web of life. The Tongva are not a federally recognized tribe, and in 2008, more than 1,700 people identified as Tongva. The Fernandeño Tataviam are based in San Fernando and currently includes Northwest LA County and Southern Ventura County. When the Spanish came to the area, they didn't differentiate between the Tongva and Tataviam people and referred to them as Fernandeño. We would like to honor this land and all the people before us who stood on it. So in this panel, we're going to be discussing Good Jobs for All and the Green New Deal. Like we said before, we're going to start with a basic introduction and summary of Good Jobs for All and a Good Jobs for All program. Then we're going to move into a discussion with panelists with pre-prepared questions, and then we're going to move on to a Q&A. So questions will be submitted through a form that should be linked in the chat right now and has been sent to many people who are attending this event. And people have been able to put in questions that they want the panelists to be asked. If you haven't had the chance, please go ahead and put your question in the form right now. And if you have already submitted a question, thank you so much. And there's a very high chance that the panelists will be asked the questions tonight. So thank you so much. And I'm going to pass it on to Nadia.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew, for that wonderful introduction. So now I will be giving a brief overview of what Good Jobs for All campaign looks like. So this year, the Sunrise Movement is demanding that our government enact a Green New Deal that guarantees jobs to build a just, sustainable, and people-centered economy to anyone who wants one. There are millions of us looking for good work, and so much good work that needs to be done. It will take millions of people to build a new energy grid, care for older folks, teach little kids, restore parks and buildings that have fallen into disrepair, and do the work of building a happy and healthy community. This year, we can put millions of people back to work in good-paying jobs, building an equitable economy. There are millions of Americans who are unemployed or underemployed, and our leaders have no plan to put people back to work as we slowly recover from COVID-19. All year long, we will continue fighting for good jobs for all, but if Democrats begin watering down the COVID relief bill or writing an infrastructure bill that gives handouts to corporations, we'll need to be prepared to intervene in those fights and use our people power to make sure whatever Congress passes this year is ambitious and just as possible. Winter Storm Uri in Texas is a key example of how we are not prepared for the realities of climate change on our communities and infrastructure. From wildfires in the west, floods in the center, and storms in the south, we have seen a rise in climate disasters and their destructive effects over the last 30 years. The climate is rapidly changing around us, and we need people with good, guaranteed jobs to revolutionize our infrastructure and protect our cities and communities from climate devastation. Now I will pass it back to Andrew to start off the panel portion of this event.
Thank you so much, Nadia. So now we're going to be joined once again by our panelists, where we're going to begin our panelist discussion. So thank you so much, everybody. So our first question goes out to whoever wants to answer it. What would a good jobs for all guarantee look like in your community? And how do you think we can work towards one? Councilmember Anthony, if you'd like to go first, please go ahead.
Sure, alphabetically, I'll go first. That's fine. Good jobs for all. That is a key component of this. First things first, I'd like to say one of the biggest barriers that we've had to the Green New Deal and a lot of environmental action is actually some of the fossil fuel unions. We've seen a lot of resistance to people who are scared that they're going to lose their coal mining jobs, their oil plant jobs, all of those, good paying union jobs that people fought for many decades to get the benefits and get the pensions. People are afraid that with the Green New Deal, that's all going to go away, and that's going to harm actual people with good wages and their families. So a good jobs for all and that job guarantee as part of the Green New Deal is the best way that we have to combine forces with environmentalists and union activists. We need to make sure that wherever you're implementing this, whether it's at the city level or the federal level or anywhere in between, the transition that we have is promising these good jobs to fossil fuel workers, to give them the training, to give them the time and the benefits of moving from where they're at now into the position they're going to be into. Or if, there's a lot of people who just are of an age that don't want to transition, we need to look at good retirements and good pensions for people who are being phased out of fossil fuel work. That is a key component of this. And, we have the money available. There are ways of getting this kind of funding. So when I look at the work here in the city of Burbank at the very local level, we've got guys working on the electrical transmission lines coming in all the way from Utah and Nevada and Arizona and way out of there. They've been working on those transmission lines from fossil fuel plants and coal fire plants. When we transition that to solar energy, it's still the same transmission lines, but the work that's being done to connect to those plants is going to be a little bit different. So we have to make sure that we're doing the job training and that we're keeping people employed, because that's really what we're doing. We're saving people. We're saving people good jobs, and we're saving people a good environment.
Okay, I guess I can go next. I want to echo everything Konstantine said. Thinking about my district, it's one of the lowest income assembly districts, and it's majority people of color, mostly Black and Latino. And so what good jobs mean is like opportunity, right? A lot of times that's connected to having good schools, and that's connected to, I meet so many community members that want to start a small business, but they don't have support for it, right? Or they don't have adequate support for it. And then also just being able to, just bring more resources to the community. I completely agree with what Konstantine said with, I love that this ties together with climate and the opportunity for that, because especially in my district, that is a lot of the conversation, in Wilmington, right? Well, a lot of these jobs are going to be lost. No, there's opportunity to create jobs here, to create clean jobs. And frankly, I'll say it, a lot of people working in a lot of these refineries, and in these things that are polluting don't even work really in the community and the district, right? And so that is an issue. And frankly, I'll say this too, a lot of the unions that call in to stop bills are also just being given a script, are being brainwashed, are not really educated and doing something like y'all are doing now and seeing what the opportunity really is. They're just being told your job is going to be taken away, right? Having this Good Jobs for All pledge and having the Green New Deal, it's not about that. It's not about taking someone's job away, right? It's about making sure that there is a just transition, that we create good unionized jobs, and making sure that we don't do that overnight, right? And that's why I think it's so urgent and so imperative, because not only is there a climate crisis, we just went through a pandemic, right? A lot of people have lost their housing, have lost their jobs, don't have a living wage. That's coming, to light now, how damaging that is, right? And so I think this is the perfect time, right, where Democrats have to step up and really have to invest. And frankly, what Congress had been investing is not enough, right? It does not meet the urgency of the crisis in terms of the job market right now, in terms of the climate crisis. So we really need to step up and stop, kind of like taking care of these corporations and not really investing in communities, because frankly, what's happening, we're seeing the income inequality increasing. We're seeing the housing crisis getting worse, right? So what we need is not a stimulus package that is watered down. What we need is something that is really aggressive and really bold and really prioritizing frontline communities. And I know that's going to really impact, my district, and what California will get, what the state will get, and my district will be really impacted by that.
Right, so I'll go ahead and go next. And, I appreciate a lot of the comments that Councilmember Anthony as well as Fatima just, offered in regards to, us having really a good jobs for all guarantee, and especially having a just transition. I want to say first and foremost, I come from a union family. My mother is a part of SEIU. My father is a part of IBEW, right? And I think a lot of times, when we're hearing worries and concerns that the economy is essentially going to begin to shift to shift and change, and that workers are not going to be given the opportunity to catch up, right? The folks that are worried about losing their jobs, they tend to be Black folks, they tend to be brown folks. That's a lot of the folks that are working in these hands-on labor jobs. And so I think their concerns are extremely valid. I think one of the things that, is unfortunate, as we've kind of seen this dynamic intensify both, between unions as well as environmental activists, is that oftentimes the folks that are working on these kinds of electrification, if you will, for example, like the electrification of buildings, or even some of the solar powered items that you see, out in parts of like the Inland Empire, some of like the wind turbines that you see, all of those are built by folks that have my father's kinds of expertise, right? There's electricians that are involved with that kind of work. And so we need their labor. And so I think there's a number of things that need to happen. I think the first thing is that we need the federal government to invest a lot of money in professional development to get those workers ready to begin to transition into this new economy. And we also need the federal government to start making big investments into a green economy, so that these jobs are then offering the kind of pay and the kind of benefits that these workers deserve. Right now, unfortunately, many of the green jobs that are offered, they're few and far between. Some of them are consulting positions, many of them are with nonprofits, and frankly, the pay is not very high for many of these positions. And that is a hard economic reality, especially if you are a low-income family where you might be the sole bread earner. And so it's really critical that we, begin offering those kinds of paid positions. I think some of the things that we could then do on the local level after we see the federal government begin to make those kinds of big investments is we can then begin to build those things into things like PLAs or project labor agreements, or also hear them referred to as community workforce agreements. We could then begin to build those green jobs into those agreements, so that, as we're installing solar or installing, wind like energy elements within our city, that those are union jobs that are going to some of those workers. But I think it's first going to need to start with a really big investment coming from the federal government to give those union workers the sense of security that they are not going to be left behind with this new economy. And so I think that's an economic reality that we can address, that the federal government can address. And I'm oftentimes frustrated because I feel like there's a lot of talking about it, but there's not a lot of doing stuff about it, right? And once we begin to put our money where our mouth is, if you will, I think we're going to begin to see that change. So, rather than this conflict continuing, we begin to make an investment and address these concerns head on.
I think another common theme between all the ideas here are centering the new economy, the new quote unquote green economy around unions and the working class, especially those left behind with the current economy. So I'd like to pass it on to Kelly, who's going to ask the next question.
Yeah, thank you so much. So our next question is going to be, what have you done to work towards or support or implement a Green New Deal? And anyone can jump in and go first.
I went first last time, so it's got to be one of you guys.
I'll go ahead and I'll go first this time. So, I've taken an approach to to kind of look at this like piece by piece within our city, right, and kind of look at the everyday kind of activities that we all do as as residents within the community. And I think one of the things that we don't think about too often is trash or waste. And so, as I began to look into this and just look into really the amount of CO2 emissions that waste, contributes to, I was like, hey, this is actually something that we can resolve. I've seen in other communities. For example, up in Washington, when visiting a friend of mine, they have curbside composting, all across Seattle. It is just the norm for them. It's something that everyone participates in, and it is a part of just something that they do within their community. It's not even, second thought for them. And so I really wanted to see the city of Alhambra launch something similar. And so starting on July 1st, we are going to be launching our first curbside composting program. This is going to be for residents as well as for our businesses as well. And so this is a huge opportunity for us, and we're really excited to see this launch. This is also the first program of its kind in Southern California, which we're really happy about. And so that's one of the things we're doing. Another thing that we passed recently, there's been a movement across the nation for what they're calling skip the stuff ordinances. And so skip the stuff ordinances essentially are intended to reduce the amount of plastic waste that we're contributing, specifically around plastic utensils. I'm sure when all of you order food to go, especially during this time period, folks will just give you a ton of plastic utensils and include that sometimes in your bag, way more than you need. And so what we've done is made it so that now residents have to opt in essentially if they want plastic utensils. So you now have to indicate either on Yelp or on the website if you even want utensils, or you have to inform the business of that so that there's not this waste that's happening. It also benefits businesses because they're not having to spend as much money on these products as well. So that was another thing that we've passed. And in terms of other issues that we're currently looking at, right now what I try to do, especially given that I'm mayor, and I think Konstantine, your city might be set up in a similar way, but we have a rotating mayorship. So my mayorship will be ending coming in June. And so when you have the role as mayor, you want to kind of utilize that position as much as possible. So I try to sign on to as much stuff as possible. So I have endorsed the Thrive Act. And I was a part of the Thrive Act video. If any of you are familiar with the Thrive Act, this is a huge, I think it's a $10 trillion investment over the next 10 years to create 15 million green union jobs. And, I think this is such an opportunity, as I mentioned before, for us to actually turn this green economy into reality. We're part of the Clean Power Alliance here in the city of Alhambra. There's currently some legislation, to continue on the CPA and to continue to hold that strong. And so I've endorsed that legislation as well and have gotten behind it. And there's also some federal legislation to protect our San Gabriel Mountains, which are really big here in the San Gabriel Valley too. So, there's things that I try to do locally. There's some kind of smaller items that we take on. But, if I don't kind of have a vote per se, like in the state legislature or in Congress, I try to submit letters, participate in videos and do what I can really as a community leader to let folks know that this is an important issue to me. And even though I might not be able to vote formally in some of these other spaces, that my support is 100% there.
Okay, I'll go next. Yeah, so, right now, like, I'm not in the city council or state legislature, right? I'm a, delegate, right? So there's only so much I can do. That's part of the reason I'm running for state assembly, because I think, one thing with the climate crisis is that we have to address it really boldly, right? And to do that, right, that happens when you're like in elected office, right? Some of these positions, like I'll just speak about like what really frustrates me about the state legislature. So what I've been doing is trying to, with the delegates that got elected, like holding, our current representative accountable. I was really upset by upset is like the kindest word I can use, but by the failure of SB 467 that's died, right? And we had the chance to have a buffer zone, something which red states even have and we don't have. And so I was working with Vision, of course, doing whatever I can, call in, right, to get movement on that. But it was Democrats, right, that unfortunately, didn't let that bill go through. So to me, like, that's the kind of thing I've been able to do, is kind of like hold some of the elected officials accountable as much as I can. I think by running, by that definitely hopefully pushes some of these politicians, right, in the right direction. And then now as delegates, just signing on to resolutions, supporting, speaking up, and when something isn't as bold in the platform, making sure that we really put things in there that are really bold. And one thing my own city has done is we were able to ban fracking in Carson, right? I think that's something locally that should be done in every city. Culver City Council has really been bold in terms of implementing a lot of progressive legislation, right, with climate and with the environment. I think that's what should be done at the local level. So unfortunately, I can't speak more about what I've legislated, right, because I haven't been able to legislate or implement, but in my role as delegate and my role as in running for office and my role as organizing, I've always stood on the side of, in making sure that we just really have bold policy. Because I think part of the frustration, right, is that we are not addressing this nearly as boldly as we can. And there are some of these things that we have to do. Like, for example, like, I love when Sunrise does a lot of the actions, like the wake up calls and things like that. It's really necessary. And, talking to Maxine Waters, like these things are, really necessary, right? Because these are the people that have the ability to do a lot of changes and implement it on the scale that it needs to be implemented, right? In order to address the climate crisis, which is like in like the next 9 years, right? And so I think what you're doing is like, I'm happy like always be alongside and fighting with y'all, and as in a delegate role, like really holding our current representatives accountable to just voting in the right direction, right? And making sure that they're doing that. So, yeah.
I'm also an assembly delegate, and the convention's coming up, and I'll tell you, Fatima is easily the loudest, tiniest person I've ever met. So I'm going to be backing her up in all of those debates and those meetings. She's got a great handle on the positions. And so anything I can do to support her in those rooms, I'm going to do. In the city of Burbank, I can't comment too much on what we're doing right now because it is going to come up for a vote, hopefully soon. But I can tell you what is public knowledge right now. There's currently a Burbank Green New Deal coming to the city council, and it includes a number of ordinances. It's basically a package of ordinances, and the big ones include declaring a climate emergency, hiring a full-time sustainability coordinator, retrofitting the city-owned buildings, modifying the work week for city employees, including telecommuting and a 4-day work week. Adding fruit-bearing trees to a pilot program. Making laws around HOA covenants that demand or require a grass lawn. Like that's a huge thing. A lot of places, people don't realize that you buy a home or you buy into a condo complex and they demand that you have, grass, which is, it's tough because, we live in Southern California and I'm preaching to the choir. You guys know what's wrong with that. So there's a lot of stuff there that we're putting together, 100% carbon neutral move by 2030. Like that's the number we're shooting for, just 9 years from now. So for us, when we in the city are looking at everything that we can do, it looks like a lot of little things, and some of it is simply just statements or building coalitions with our other energy partners, LADWP, Glendale Water and Power. But it adds up, you get all of these little things together and it starts to create a movement. And if we can do that in one city and somebody else can do it in another city, and you build this coalition, it moves, it creates a wave of change. And that's really what we need to do. That's why, you have Sunrise all over the country, and the youth are just starting to really knock on their city hall doors and their state legislator doors, as opposed to just simply waiting for whichever president is going to come along and snap their fingers, because that's not the way these things work. We have to do it en masse, and every little drop creates the ocean.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I think something that you've really shown is how much you can do in your local governments and in cities, and just how important it is to pressure your local officials. And that's been super inspiring. So thank you. And I'm going to pass it off to Nadia for our next question.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. So this has already been touched on, but as you all know, this pandemic has disproportionately affected working class and BIPOC communities. So I wanted to ask you all specifically, how will you advocate for communities on the front line?
I guess I'll go first because I haven't gone first yet. Okay. That's such a loaded question, right? I mean, because it's affected the working class and BIPOC communities in so many ways. And how will you advocate? Yeah, there's so much. I think, one thing I'm actually trying to do here in Carson, as a delegate, is I know, Sasha, you guys passed the hero pay resolution, and we haven't passed that actually in a few city governments here. And it's one small thing, but it really makes a difference in people's lives. And so Carson and Compton hasn't passed that. So I was going to reach out to like Daniel Lee and like Sasha to try to see how, we can write up something to get that done. So as a delegate, that's something I want to do, because like so many people in my district, have been out of work or are struggling, with payments and things like that, and medical bills and everything. So that's definitely something. I think one thing I think about too is education. I think this has really shown the digital divide that exists, right, between low income communities and between more privileged communities. Broadband access, right, is really, really important. So that's something I'm definitely going to be advocating for. I know, like, for example, in Watson, Willowbrook, in my district, 40% don't have, Wi-Fi and broadband access. So that's something that becomes, sorry, that's just my husband behind me. That's something that becomes, I don't think he knows I'm in a live right now. Okay. Anyway, that's something, that is really important that I'm going to be advocating for. So broadband access, also just like the gap, right? I'll give you an example. My son has autism, and thankfully we've had the privilege of being able to afford childcare. But I know a lot of low income families who's, single moms and things, and, single dads, what do they do, right? My child has his aide there, and then he also has me or a childcare, provider, or my husband there, right? There's 2 adults with him. What do families do when they have to work and they can't afford childcare? So things like universal childcare, right, becomes really important. That's been passed at different state levels. That's something I'm definitely going to be fighting for. And also just, I've talked to some of the most progressive legislators up there, frankly, and it seems like, again, just sorry not to say education too long, but it's really important, especially in this time for frontline communities. That's never really been prioritized, and I'm really excited to work with, I think Assemblymember Alex Lee is on the education committee, so that's something on my radar to like work with him, because I have a lot of activists on my campaign who are really passionate about it and want to work on, what we can do to really increase the per pupil funding and really equitably fund these communities. So that's something really important. I think, though, more holistically, right, we have to make sure we are housing everyone, right? And I think that that's something that's been also, frustrating me a lot. I feel like we've always been managed to fund, in LA City Council, for example, we're always, taking care of our police, right? But not taking care of our housing to the level, I think, that we need to be taking care of those who need housing. So that's something also that I'll be advocating for and pushing for and fighting for as much as I can in my capacity.
I'll go second. The you know, when we look at the pandemic, the frontline healthcare workers that have been devastated by this are that specific population is overwhelmingly women and women of color. And so what we do as legislators, as government officials, as advocates, anything that we do to really tackle the pandemic, to really help with you know, personal protective equipment and keeping infections down and all of that really lowers the risk and the health adverse aspects of this pandemic to those communities. And you know, it's such an important aspect of it that we really don't think about it when we talk about the pandemic in general. Everyone's always concerned with when are we reopening, and oh, the economy, and oh, my business this and my business that. It's like, look, you know, we can do everything that you can to be safe, but if you get sick and you get deadly sick, there's only one place you're going to go, and that's the hospital where these people have been working day in and day out for over a year now, and they're exhausted and they're wiped. I mean, there are people quitting the healthcare industry who are just saying, look, I can't do it anymore. I've seen too much. I personally got sick. Everyone I know got sick. So handling this pandemic in a responsible way directly affects you know, people of color and disadvantaged communities. Coming out of that pandemic, though, this is the chance for us to have the kind of economic recovery that we really want to see. You know, here in the city of Burbank, we have neighborhoods of, you know, low income and older building renters and folks who, you know, live just on the other side of the freeway. The smog and the smoke coming from that freeway, from, you know, the bad pipes and the low quality, you know, insulation. I mean, I'm guessing there's still, you know, asbestos in some of those old buildings there. That's where our low income and our communities of color live here in the city. And so what we need to do is really protect our renters. We need to protect those frontline workers who have those low wage jobs. Just a couple of weeks ago, we passed the hero pay ordinance here in the city of Burbank. So that's really going to help out, you know, the people working every day at the grocery stores. Like, that's the other place where you go all the time. Like, you know, and these people come in contact with the virus and people who are sick. And so doing those really important economic issues, it has to be targeted. It has to be focused. And you have to keep those communities in mind when you're passing legislation. So that's what I try to do.
Thanks. Can I say the question again? I apologize.
Yeah, it's on the ticker down there, but it's how will you advocate for communities on the front lines?
Yeah, so, you know, there's really been a number of approaches that I've had to this. You know, first off, Alhambra is an entirely BIPOC communities, right? Our community is predominantly Asian American and Latinx, and about 70% of our residents are immigrants. So we have a huge population here of folks of color, and we also have a very large undocumented population that is also low income and does not have the same access, you know, to technology as some of our other residents. And so from day one, before I was even elected to office, I began connecting with people, you know, online that just needed help because they, first of all, had no idea what was going on. They weren't receiving any sort of contact from the city or from the district because they didn't have access to internet at home. And I just got out there and started connecting with people. And we started delivering food to families. And, you know, at first it was, I think the first food delivery I did was 4 families in one apartment complex. And, you know, that turned into like 300 families weekly at one of our local food banks. And we just really had to scale things up. Our school district and particularly our local teachers union has played a really huge role in making sure that many of our undocumented families are continuing to be fed during this time. The city has also partnered with the school district, as well as a number of other nonprofit partners, so that we're having, food deliveries and food drives. So that's one of the ways we've been providing assistance. And then in addition to that, as Fatima had mentioned, we've passed Hero Pay here. And, for any of you that are kind of familiar with Alhambra or just the San Gabriel Valley in general, Alhambra has been extremely conservative for a very long time. And so it took about 3 months for us to pass it. I think we probably took the longest out of any city. But it took some time because people needed a lot of information. They really wanted to understand the issue. But I was willing to have the conversation as long as it took. And so, we spent a lot of time really educating the other council members about this, getting them to understand the different positions, and also hearing from grocery store workers as well. And so we passed that. I want to say it was just about maybe 4 weeks ago. I mean, it was super duper recent. And I'm extremely proud we were able to pass that. I had somebody that is a worker with UFCW tell me, when they said Alhambra passed Hero Pay, we were like, are you sure, Alhambra? Did you misread the information? But and I'm just really flattered that we were able to get that through and pass it. But I think more opportunities to pass ordinances like that, where we're putting money directly back into the pockets, of some of these workers that are on the front lines, is really critical. Another thing that we did that I don't think folks necessarily, think about as kind of a policy that helps some of our BIPOC communities is we instituted a third-party fee limit for our local vendors. And so basically what that means is if you're a local restaurant owner, you only have to pay up to 15% to utilize something like DoorDash or Uber Eats or any of these kinds of entities that basically restaurants were depending on in order to continue operating, during this COVID time period. And for, us here in Alhambra, many of our local small restaurants are owned by folks that are BIPOC. Many of them are immigrant folks. Many of them are undocumented. And these are, local family-owned restaurants that were barely getting by and were being charged, upwards of 30% on every order that they were delivering out. So they were barely making a profit. And so, that was, again, another opportunity for us to shift dollars, away from corporations and back into the pockets of our local residents. And so I want to continue to look for opportunities like that. I think what some folks mentioned before, just in regards to housing, I think housing and especially protecting renters right now is so critical. I am a renter. As I'm sitting here talking to you right now, my roommate's in the other room, my boyfriend's sitting next to me, and I know how hard this time period has been because it's been challenging for me, frankly. And, that's the reality for a lot of our communities. 62% of residents here in Alhambra are renters. And unfortunately, during the campaign and after that campaign, I ran into tons of residents that were being taken advantage of, that were being told that the law did not apply to them, that protections did not apply to them. And, unfortunately, we had to get involved. I had, a case where a landlord went as far as turning off the water and electricity on a tenant's house in order to force them out of their home. I mean, these things are just infuriating when you hear these stories. And so, now being in this position, one of the things that I've done is if a renter has an issue, I'll go ahead and I'll step in and I'll just talk straight to the landlord. I mean, I'll, just let them know, hey, these are what the rules are. These are what the protections are. And really empowering, I think, residents to understand what their rights are is the biggest game changer you can do. I mean, I'll talk to tenants I've worked with and they're like, now that I know my rights, I feel like I'm able to stand up for myself. I feel like I'm able to protect my family. And so I try to do that as much as possible too. And for me, I think that is going to be something that will be critical, especially between now and June 30th, to make sure that folks aren't being forced out of their homes and intimidated into thinking that they have to leave and there's no opportunity for them to get help or assistance. And so the next kind of phase of things that I'm looking at doing is essentially just getting volunteers out and just door knocking and getting that information physically out to people, because I think that's the only way we are going to reach those hard to reach communities and make sure that they're being protected during this time.
I imagine getting a call from the mayor of Alhambra probably gets those landlords to shape up real quick, right?
Yeah, thank you all so much for sharing. It was really amazing to hear all that you've done and all that you plan to do to keep prioritizing these communities. I really like how Hero Pay was mentioned, because that's something that SLAE has been planning on organizing around as well. So, like, for any of you, if any of you have like any asks from SLAE or anything that you need more people power with, or any support from the youth, we are so willing to help you all out. Yeah, and now I will give it back over to Kelly to ask one last question before we get into the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Nadia. So our last question is going to be, what role do youth play in fighting for the Green New Deal and an equitable future for all? And how can teens in LA get involved politically?
I can start this one off. I have a great story with this. So some of you may know Emma Codaverdian. She does a lot of work with Sunrise and the local organizer. And she gave me a call the other day. She says, "Hey, we're protesting in Senator Hertzberg's district. Can you come down here? I mean, he part of his district is in Burbank, and that's you." I'm like, "Oh, okay, all right." So we drove out to see her and a bunch of other, I call them kids. They're they're old enough to make their own decision, but I'm old, so they're kids to me. And they're out there, and there's the big streets passing by, and they've got the banners out, and they're yelling at cars, and they're holding stuff up, and they're taking video. They're doing, I don't know what they're doing, Snapchats, TikToks, whatever the kids are doing, and they're just throwing it up and like, "Councilmember, come in here and say some words and speak truth to power." I'm like, "All right, okay." So we get in there, we take some photos, and we do the whole thing, and they're all excited. And this was all about SB 467. He ended up abstaining. It died because of 3 abstentions. It's like, come on, take the vote. At least take the vote. That's just like, oh man. Like, you abstain from something if you have a personal conflict. Like if the bill is going to affect something you own stock in, or your business that you're the president of, you don't abstain just because you want to take a vote. Like, that's, come on. Anyway, so we were out there and we were yelling, and I wouldn't have done it if these kids hadn't been like, "Hey, come down here. It's cool. All the kids are doing it. Hang out with us." And I'm like, all right. And it was fun, and it was exciting, and it was so refreshing to see these young folks get engaged. And we've all been doing this a long time. We know when a vote's going to go south, and we get disappointed. We don't get our hopes up. We're like, okay, we got to go through the motions of forcing this and forcing that and making this deal and getting it. But like, I remember what it was like 20, 25 years ago, thinking, okay, if we do this, we're going to win, and it's going to happen, and change is coming. And it's so exciting to see that, because to be honest, if we didn't do that when we were young, we wouldn't be here today. If we didn't make all the moves that we made 10, 15, 20 years ago, we wouldn't be where we are now. And I'm so excited to see that these kids they're doing it. I'm sorry, they're doing it better than we did. I mean, these kids are out there, they're organizing. I didn't learn how to organize until I was in my 30s. These kids are like, all right, phone trees, and get in the group chat and Signal and all of the, and like, what's the other one? The Instagram. They got that. It's incredible. It's incredible to watch. So I'm so happy that it's happening. I don't know if that answered the question, but that's the story I wanted to tell.
I forgot if I was next or Fatima was next. I apologize, but I honestly feel like youth play the biggest role in a Green New Deal. I think it's really youth that have even brought attention, to this issue, and really given this issue excitement and energy and momentum. Just to kind of show you what that looks like on a local city level, we're currently in the middle, or we were in the middle of doing our strategic planning process. And so before we rolled out our strategic plan, we did this big community-wide survey that we paid for. And so the consultant that we hired did a great job of making sure that they were contacting, folks across, age ranges and whatnot. And so one of the things that they asked is, what would you like the city to take a larger role in? And one of the things that we've been working on has been getting together our sustainability plan. It's been a little difficult, unfortunately, because we have not been able to secure grants so that we could hire a consultant for this, but it's one of my priorities. It's one of my other council members' priorities as well. And so that was included in there as an option. And the sustainability plan ended up being like the #1 item out of everything. I mean, there are 17 things to select from, and maybe even more than that. And the sustainability plan was clearly #1. And so when you look at the metrics broken down, you can see folks ages, I think it was like 16 to 24. And it was like 90% of them selected the sustainability plan. And because they did that, they like pushed those numbers up, and it just had a huge impact on the data results. And I think for some of our other council members that maybe, don't necessarily hold environmental sustainability as like a top priority, maybe it's like a mid-tier priority, they saw that and they were like, wow, like this is clearly something that's important to our youth, important to the residents that are going to continue to, have their lives here in the future. And so this needs to be a big priority for us. And so it was on the sustainability plan originally previously, or it was on the strategic plan previously, but it's now, been moved up even more to be an even higher priority because of the way that folks participated in this survey. And that was by, no one, as far as I know, no one organized around that. It just kind of happened naturally. And so really the attention, the energy, and the momentum that I think that youth are really giving the Green New Deal and just really the sustainability movement is so important and so critical. And in terms of, ways that youth can get involved, especially for a small city like, Alhambra has right under, 100,000 residents. If you were, let's say, for example, to organize, 10 to 15 youth to reach out to, myself or any of the other council members, about a specific issue, and you said, hey, we really want you to, do X, Y, and Z because we believe that it's really important, to promote a green Alhambra or to promote for us to achieve a Green New Deal in Alhambra, we're going to pay attention because our city is relatively small. We don't receive that much, contact in general. I can't speak for, a larger city like the city of LA, but here in a small city, that can a few people can have a really big impact. We have local organizations such as Active SGV or API Forward Movement. These are kind of like local organizations that focus on sustainability, and they do kind of some of that organizing. And whenever they organize around an issue, they're super impactful just because of how small our local cities are. So if you're in a small city, I really encourage you to get involved. There's also commissions you can get involved with as well. That's a great opportunity. Reaching out to your council member, especially if you see a vacancy and saying, hey, I'm interested, can you sign me up for this? Oftentimes, I'll tell you, I ran into other council members that are like, I don't know who to appoint to that commission. Like, I can't come up with anyone. And so they're just looking for somebody. So if you go ahead and let them know that you're interested, they'll appoint you. But I think getting active, with your friends, obviously trying to make it fun too, is a great way to get involved locally.
Yeah, for me, the youth are really important. I'm an educator, and it's like, it was the reason I decided to run. It was the youth that inspired me. It was me thinking about what communities and what the planet wasn't offering them and how unfair it is that you have to stand there and fight when you should be having fun and enjoying your life, right? But you're the ones on the front lines. So that's really what pushed me to get involved. And, I think if you think about who, the Green New Deal is written by young people, right? It was, I think this issue was brought forth, I would say solely by young people, really. I mean, yes, you know, we had Al Gore talk about it here, we had someone talk about it there, but the way it was brought forth in this larger than life, like, you know, issue of environmental justice was the youth, right? I mean, I'm just gonna say it was only the youth. And I think, you know, getting involved. Okay, so one thing, you know, I did was when I created my slate of delegates, I didn't have limits, right? You know, for, oh, they have to be this old, have this much experience. My only thing I thought about was, you know, for my campaign, I thought about who is really, you know, doing the work around environmental justice, around civil rights, and, you know, the organizing the community. And that's why my slate has a lot of environmental advocates on it. We have the founder of, like, you know, we have someone from Sunrise LA, UC Irvine on it, Sunrise UC Irvine on it, and Sunrise OC. We have someone, and she's in Compton, but, you know, she goes to school in OC. We have someone who founded an environmental justice group for LA County on it. And, you know, and I have someone in Carson on there on it from Carson who's like fought, you know, to ban fracking longer than I even, you know, was fighting for it while I was teaching. And so, like, we have a lot of environmental activists on our slate, and a lot of them are young people. I think 3 of them are in college still right now, right? So I would say, yeah, like, find ways to get into these places of power. We need actions. We need to go outside of these representatives' homes. But as youth, you can also find power in these spaces by running to be a delegate. You know, one of those college students that won on my slate from Compton is now on the board of the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party. You know, I asked her to run for it, and she stepped up and ran. And I'm always pushing the young people on my slate to run for these positions because ultimately, to put it simply, it's your future, right? You'll be here longer than any of us, and that is so important. I think if you look at around the country, the type of candidates we've been able to elect who are really championing this, it's young people that are powering them up, right? It is phone banking, text banking, and like Konstantine mentioned, they are better organizers, right? I mean, I'm having a TikTok started for my campaign this time, and it's because there's like a high school student leading my communications team, and she's like, "Let's do it." I was like, "Okay, you do it." I don't even know how to, you know, how to maintain that or start that up, but do it, right? So, I think not just digitally, I think this is your planet. I think that's why the youth are fighting, because it's like your planet and your future, right? And rightly so. I just always feel sad that that has to happen, and that our elected officials can't understand that our youth should be worried about school and their future, you know, and their families, but they're here out fighting, you know, for us. And it's great you're doing that. It's sad that that has to happen, but keep doing that. And that's why anytime I can stand in allyship, you know, I do, and I will, right? Because it's just the right thing to do. And so, yeah, that's what I want to share.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed all of your stories, and I think just like hearing about this topic, which I think is personal to a lot of us watching, maybe who are involved in youth organizing, from a different perspective, and also just like so much great advice. So thank you for that. And we're going to move on to the next part of our panel, which is questions that people who are watching have submitted. And so our first question that was submitted was, how do you plan to use your leverage with the entire progressive movement behind you to hold your colleagues accountable?
If it's okay, I'd like to go first because I didn't realize this would go over an hour. I actually have to go to another meeting. The best way, I think, to hold each other accountable is to get organized, right? To get people involved and to get local community engagement. The more voices you have in the room, the more likely people are going to listen to you. And you have to, you know, build those coalitions and cross those bridges and build those bridges so that when you enter a room, you know you're not starting at zero. You don't have to convince, you know, like like the mayor was saying, you know, it took months to get that ordinance passed because all of the education and getting workers on the line. If we start now and we build those coalitions early, all of that follows. Thank you so much for having this together. I do have to sign off. I have another thing at 6 o'clock. Thank you for organizing this. Lovely seeing you again, Fatima. Lovely meeting you for the first time. I think we've been on. This is our first Zoom together, right, Mayor? I believe so. Okay. Well, have a good day, everybody, and keep doing the good work.
Yes, and so can the question be put up again? Sorry, so many great detailed questions. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so one thing we did more recently is we talked about healthcare, the healthcare workers, but there was an opportunity to pass single payer in California, right? And so that was something the delegates and I wanted to fight for, and we met with Assemblymember Gibson's staff and we advocated for it. So we try to use our leverage. And I think part of the reason they met with us was because we were delegates, right? And maybe because I was his opponent too, right? So I think using that as leverage to hold them accountable is really important. Unfortunately, we didn't get the response that we wanted from them. And unfortunately, the bill didn't get the response it needed from the state legislature. And but I think that's the way we use it. I think that's why I encourage youth to run for positions like delegate, right? Or really work for, look how you can support a local city council candidate. Look how, you can be on a commission. Things like that are so important because then you get a year to these places of power, right? That's how you get to hold folks accountable and really voice the issues you really care about. And I think, one thing that Sunrise LA already does well, and Sunrise LA and youth groups do well is, once you elect progressive politicians, right? The people elected them, and so let's keep them accountable, right? I think that's really important. I don't think the movement, when you elect someone, ends at the election. I think it continues. And I think, in fact, you need to be more beholden and conscious of the stakeholders that elected you, right? And so I think that's a way to be present as well. Like the mayor mentioned, calling into meetings, right? And things like that are really important. I heard Jane from Koreatown today say that she's really worried about the budget because not as many people are calling in this time as last time. And so do that, right? Because your voices are what make a difference. That is your way to get access to power, is calling in, being on these commissions, running for delegate, right? And so that's kind of what I wanted to share, how to use leverage. And even as someone young, you can, I'm sure Sunrise LA Youth isn't too young to be on a commission, right? Or something like that. So you can do that. And then also calling in. I know you all do that really well. I know recently you wrote postcards, I believe. I forget for what campaign, maybe it was for Thrive, but I'm not remembering. But I think that is the way, you hold them accountable, is getting all your people power and putting pressure on them. And then also publicly, right? Like when you do these actions, it's really important, right? Because that's what's really, really important, to make sure that the elected officials know that it's not just behind closed doors. We need both, right? We need to meet with them behind closed doors, but we also need to, part of a democracy is that you have the right, to say, hey, this is what I want you to do better, and please do this, and please sign this, right? And so I think both of those things are really important, and I think your group does that really well.
So I think one of the ways that, and first of all, I want to say, I don't know if I have the entire progressive movement behind me. I feel like that might be a strong statement, but I do have some progressive support. I don't want to get too bold here, but one of the ways that I try to hold my colleagues accountable, and I think also I like the term persuade, a bit better, and kind of work with persuading them. There's one of the things you have to keep in mind, especially for us once we're elected, is we have the Brown Act, and because of the Brown Act, we have limits on how we can interact with our other council members. So for example, I can't be with any of my two other council members in a private room at any given moment, because the opportunity that we might talk about council business may come up, and should we coordinate around a decision outside of a meeting, it would be considered inappropriate and a violation of the Brown Act. And so when you have an issue that you really kind of care about and you want to coordinate with somebody on, for me, because I have a council with 5 members, I can only pick one other member, because if I pick 3, then that's a simple majority. And so it operates like that on any kind of governing body. And so one of the ways that you can, still make sure that, I guess, council members are receiving that kind of support and feedback from residents is by letting other coalitions know, that they might need some follow-up, they might need a check-in, they might need some education. And so I'm really connected and plugged in with many of the progressive coalitions here in Alhambra. I worked with them for about 3 years before I was elected to office, and was a regular at council meetings, was a regular at many of their events, and so they're very familiar with me. And I also spent a lot of time studying my other council members. I think it's really important, and something that we don't talk about enough is really understanding where somebody stands on certain issues, what they genuinely care about, and what kind of moves somebody. And I really spent a lot of time kind of understanding that with my other colleagues. And so if I'm worried about their kind of understanding of a particular issue, I'll typically know that in advance before I even bring it to the meeting. And so, then I know to kind of let other coalitions in our community to, do a quick follow-up call, maybe provide them with some education, since I'm not able to do that, since, we're not able to have that connection outside of the formal council meeting. And so those groups will go ahead and do that. So I think that's one way you can kind of organize with other progressive electeds, is by doing that kind of power mapping. And this is something that I used to do professionally for organizations. I worked at the Pat Brown Institute before, and we would work with nonprofits doing this and kind of assessing, and predicting essentially what ways people could vote, and who are those that could be persuaded if given more information, and who are kind of some key touch points of folks you need to talk to. So, if any of you are interested in doing that, or want to sit down and talk about that, I'm happy to do it. I offer to do that for many progressive groups, all the time, and I'm happy to, offer up that assistance, that kind of technical assistance anytime.
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel like I've definitely learned a lot about like how local elected officials work together, and how they can work with progressive organizations like Sunrise. And so that's been really helpful. And then to move on to our last question of the day, our last question is going to be, do you have any opportunities for the youth to get involved in your work? Or
Sasha, Mayor, you want to go first, since you went last? Yeah.
Yeah, for me, because I just finished up my campaign, right? So my campaign ended, and I won and was elected to office very recently, November 3rd, 2020. So I'm not campaigning just yet. Hopefully I will be, come 2024. But until then, you can head to my website. It's SashaReneePerez.com. You can sign up to, volunteer, to get involved. I have a really small internship program. I have 2 interns that I recruit. One of them's a high school intern, the other one's a college intern, and they help me out with a lot of my my work, with making sure that I'm able to to keep on top of all of the different activities that come my way. On top of that too, as we kind of see things open up and see more folks get vaccinated, there will be other opportunities to have in-person events and other actions. And I try to update folks via my emailing list as things are going on. But feel free to sign up at my website. You can also, there's a join us link that you can click on, and from there, you can include that you are a member of the Sunrise Movement of Los Angeles and part of the youth arm. And then I'll go ahead and just include you in my mailing list and let you know of upcoming actions that are going on locally.
Yeah, for me, my website is FatimaForAssembly.com. It's, I'm sure someone's going to put it in the chat. But yeah, I'm like actively running right now, right? So I ran in 2020 and got like 41% of the vote. So I didn't want to give up on the district, and I'm running again, and hoping to start early, close the gap. Because one thing I couldn't really do as well as I wanted because of COVID was field. By the time I had, built up it and could do field, it was like things were shutting down. And so that's something I'm really excited to do. And we are starting up like a lot of our volunteer teams, definitely in May, and potentially some field in May and things like that. So same thing on my website, there's a get involved button. And so go ahead and click on that, and yeah, we can get you plugged in that way. We're gonna have a communications team for social media and emails, and a policy team. So one thing that's really important to me is state legislature is so far away, right? From a lot of us, it's like you know, and people, some of the bills aren't really, you know, the importance of them locally to understand, so, right? And, you know, sometimes the language is really academic and it's kind of meant to be that way sometimes, right? And so one thing I want to do with the policy arm, work with the social media arm, is to really make those bills easy to understand, right? It's the best way, it's the best thing for democracy to be like, okay, like this is how it's going to affect our community, right? Maybe share constituent stories and things like that about how something can, a bill can really change their life. And so that's one thing. And then with Field, we're going to, you know, focus on growing our volunteer base and reaching out to voters and kind of doing the same right now, like, you know, informing them of what's going on. There's a local election in Carson happening. You know, I was kind of involved in the Compton elections. We did videos with all the candidates, and that really helped the Compton voters a lot. Whatever capacity we could do to help, right, to inform voters. So that's something we'll do in Carson too, because there's a special election coming up. Make sure that voters, you know, have all the information they need. It's like really important, right, to do that. And yeah, so just go to my website, sign up. I would say, like, you know, we do need donations, but the thing is, there's a limit that you have to be 18 and older to donate. So you know, get your parents to donate, you know, or your older siblings, you know, that would be amazing as well. So yeah, but this is the last question. So I don't have time to like thank you all, but thank you so much for all the activism, the work you're doing, and the education you're doing, and the accountability and you're doing with elected officials. It is so needed, so important. And I know that's really what's pressuring them, right? There's nothing like a young person coming to your door and saying, you are not serving me in my future. I think that's the most powerful thing someone can do. So keep doing that work in any ways that, you know, we can support, I can support, like, let me know.
Yeah, thank you. And that is going to be the end of the panel. So I want to end by just saying thank you to all of our panelists, to Fatima and Mayor Pérez, for giving up your time to share your experiences and knowledge with us. And I also want to thank everyone who attended today, because I know we've gone over an hour and you took that time out of your day. So thank you. And the last thing I want to do is give a little shout out to Sunrise LA Youth. And so I want to talk about how you can get involved or just stay updated with us. So the first thing I want to mention is our social media. You can follow Sunrise LA Youth on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And then there will be a link in the chat for you to sign up to join our hub.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. We went from a breakout room to actually having this panel with amazing people. The mayor of Alhambra, okay? And then also Fatima Iqbal-Zubair, who's becoming like a huge force within the progressive wing of the California Democratic Party. So big shout out. Can't wait to help everybody everybody going forward, especially the Assembly campaign, which is amazing. Last time Sunrise endorsed. And hopefully we'll be able to help you again soon. But thank you so much.
Thank you. This is such a cool panel. Just appreciate all the work that all of you are doing. You all are so phenomenal.
All right, thank you, everyone. Okay, bye, Mayor. See you. I'm going. Oh, I was gonna say I'm gonna be in touch with you actually because we're still live.
Okay.